The explosion came before the dawn, tearing the fragile silence of the valley into screaming pieces of fire and dust, and in that instant everyone believed the outpost was finished. The medic tent shook like paper in a storm, the ground buckled under the weight of fear, and a woman everyone thought was invisible stood frozen with blood on her hands that did not belong to her. No one looked at her as a warrior. No one imagined that before the sun climbed over the mountains, she would change the fate of the men fighting outside and rewrite the meaning of courage itself. Before the story pulls you deeper into that chaos, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from if you believe that even the quietest people can change the world. Her name was Emily Carter, and to the SEALs stationed at the remote forward base, she was just the nurse. She moved softly, spoke little, and carried herself with a calm that felt almost fragile compared to the hardened soldiers around her. She treated shrapnel wounds, stitched torn skin, whispered reassurance to men who pretended not to be afraid, and worked through nights without sleep. None of them asked about her past. None of them noticed the way her eyes tracked the horizon when helicopters passed, or how her hands never trembled even when blood soaked through her gloves. She wore the same dusty uniform, ate the same tasteless rations, and blended into the background of war like a shadow that did not want to be seen. The base had been set up in a narrow valley surrounded by jagged hills that looked peaceful from a distance but hid danger in every fold of rock. For weeks, the tension had been building. Supply routes were unreliable, intelligence was thin, and the enemy seemed to know every move before it happened. The SEAL team, led by Commander Jack Reynolds, was exhausted but disciplined, carrying the weight of responsibility like a second set of armor. Jack noticed everything on the battlefield, but even he saw Emily only as the lifeline that kept his men breathing, not as someone who would ever step into the fight itself. The attack came with brutal precision. Mortars rained down, communications went dark, and the perimeter collapsed faster than anyone expected. Wounded men poured into the medic tent, and Emily worked without pause, her world narrowing to pulses, breathing, and survival. Outside, gunfire echoed like thunder trapped between mountains. Inside, fear pressed against her chest, not because she doubted herself, but because she knew exactly what was happening beyond the canvas walls. She recognized the pattern of the assault, the timing, the way the enemy probed for weakness. It was knowledge she had buried deep, a past she had sworn never to return to. As the minutes dragged on, the situation worsened. A group of enemy fighters breached the eastern ridge, pinning down a squad and cutting off their retreat. Ammunition ran low. Air support was delayed. Jack made decisions faster than he could process the consequences, knowing that one mistake could cost lives. When a wounded soldier was carried in with a bullet wound too close to the heart, Emily felt something inside her crack. Not from fear, but from recognition. She had seen this kind of battle before, years ago, in another life she rarely spoke about. Emily had not always been just a nurse. Long before she learned how to save lives, she had learned how to take them. Raised on a military base, trained by a father who believed survival was a language everyone should speak, she had joined a special operations program that few even knew existed. She was young, capable, and deadly, until one mission went wrong and cost the lives of people she loved. The guilt followed her like a ghost, and she walked away from combat, choosing healing over destruction, hoping that saving others might one day save her from herself. Back in the present, the ghost returned with teeth. When the firing grew closer and the radio crackled with broken calls for help, Emily realized that staying in the tent was no longer enough. The men outside were running out of time. She stepped out into the smoke-filled air, her boots crunching over debris, and scanned the battlefield with a clarity that startled even her. A fallen rifle lay near the sandbags, abandoned by a soldier who had been dragged to safety. Without hesitation, she picked it up. Jack saw her then, standing where no medic should be, adjusting her stance with practiced ease. For a heartbeat, disbelief froze him. Then the first shot rang out, precise and controlled, dropping an enemy fighter who had been advancing on a wounded SEAL. The second shot followed, then a third, each one creating space where there had been none. Emily moved with purpose, her fear transformed into focus, her past merging with the present in a way she could no longer deny. The battlefield shifted. The enemy, expecting resistance from trained soldiers, hesitated when fire came from an unexpected angle. Emily advanced, using cover, communicating with hand signals she had not used in years but had never forgotten. She wasn't reckless. Every move was calculated, every breath measured. She fought not with anger, but with resolve, driven by the faces of the men she had treated, the lives she refused to let slip away again. Jack adapted instantly. Trust was a currency forged in moments like this, and he spent it without question. He redirected his team, using the opening Emily created to flank the attackers. The valley echoed with the sound of determination fighting back against despair. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. When reinforcements finally arrived and the last echoes of gunfire faded, the ground was littered with the evidence of survival bought at a terrible price. Emily lowered the rifle, her arms heavy, her chest tight with emotion she had held back for too long. She returned to the medic tent, hands once again steady as she treated the wounded, but something had changed. The men looked at her differently now. Not with fear, but with respect layered over gratitude. In the quiet that followed, Jack stood outside the tent, watching the sun rise over the hills that had tried and failed to claim them. He understood then that courage did not always announce itself. Sometimes it wore the face of someone who chose compassion after violence, someone who carried strength quietly until the moment demanded it be revealed. Emily never asked for recognition. She returned to her role, stitching, cleaning, comforting. But the story spread, carried in the voices of men who would never forget the nurse who stepped into fire when hope was almost gone. For Emily, the battle did not erase her past, but it reframed it. She realized that redemption was not about erasing who she had been, but about choosing who she would be when it mattered most. If you're still here, take a second and comment the word courage below if this story reminds you that strength often hides in the most unexpected hearts. As the base was eventually evacuated and life moved forward, Emily carried the lesson with her. That even after loss, even after guilt, there is a moment waiting where you can choose to stand up again. The SEALs moved on to other missions, but they carried her story like a quiet flame, a reminder that heroes are not always defined by rank or weapon, but by the willingness to act when everything is on the line. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness and bravery can exist in the same soul, please like, comment, and share this video so more people can feel this message. Your support helps stories like this reach those who need them most.